So if you're wanting to really get started with exercise, maybe you want to lose some weight, maybe you want to try and think about ways of achieving things you've never done before, maybe running a marathon or even something simpler than that, then there are actually ways that you need to go about doing things that are very, very safe. Not many people are aware, but about 1 in 100,000 people who attempt an endurance event, whether it be an Ironman or whether it be a marathon, end up dying from heart attacks. So this is a really critical thing. So how do we go about starting to lose weight, getting fit and doing all these things without potentially putting ourselves at risk? Well, to understand that, the first thing you need to understand is that when we start talking about exercise, really one of the big problems that most people have is this thing called overtraining. And overtraining is a huge, huge problem, not just for athletes, but also for the everyday person who's stuck in this mentality of no pain, no gain. When really what we're talking about with exercise is energy mechanisms and expending energy in very specific ways, whether it be through fat burning or whether it be through sugar burning. And understanding this is really, really critical. So what are some of the key issues that are associated with overtraining? Well, these are actually quite broad. So a couple of key things you can have with overtraining. Fatigue is one of the most obvious ones, but it doesn't often start until late. In other words, most people when they first start overtraining, pushing themselves too hard, actually feel better over the first couple of weeks. So this is a key thing that is often mistaken. Libido. So something like your sex drive, these things get really knocked about. Heart rate changes, so morning resting heart rate, and even when you're running or if you're doing your exercise, the inability to control your heart rate and keep your heart rate down is often associated with what we call sympathetic outflow, those fight or flight responses, which is often associated with overtraining as well. And insomnia. Sleeping issues are a big, big problem with people who overtrain. Overtraining is a stressful event. Overtraining occurs when all the activity you're doing is greater than the amount that you can recover from day to day. And some people cope with high loads really, really well, and some people cope with high loads really badly. And it's not a matter of how much you can do, it's about doing what is right for you. So if you're in an occupation where you're standing up all day, you're in a high stress environment, you're probably not going to cope with the same level of stress as somebody who is in a quiet, relaxed type of position throughout their day. So understanding this is really important. I'm going to talk to you about how you can track this in just a second. Because as we touched on before, one of the biggest issues with overtraining is this one here. And that is heart attack. This is a big, 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 big problem, okay? Heart attacks are a huge, huge issue for people who overtrain. And it's really, really broad in the sense that, yes, athletes have it, but not just athletes. We have a lot of different everyday people who suffer from heart attacks just from pushing themselves too hard. All right, so how are we going to go about approaching this? So the first thing you need to understand before we can start talking about how to do it is you need to understand what happens with exercise. So in short, if this dark line here is our fat burning capability and the blue line here is our carb burning capability, the higher your heart rate gets, the more carbohydrate we tend to burn. And this is something most people aren't aware of. In other words, the more glucose dependent you get, which means also the more lactic acid that you tend to burn during the process. So one of the key things we want to make sure when we're doing this is that there is actually a sweet spot. So if we push too hard and we get our heart rate really high up here, then what ends up happening is that our carbohydrate intake tends to increase, our carbohydrate utilization tends to increase and our fat utilization tends to decrease. Sorry, I've got these things back to front here. And our fat utilization tends to decrease. So this is okay for if you're doing short, sharp sprints. This is kind of what we're looking for. But if you're really trying to lose weight and you want to improve your aerobic capacity, do some endurance work, and even just start exercising, what we really want to do is not put a massive stress or a massive burden on our system by making it carb rich, increasing acidity levels, increasing hormones such as cortisol, which are main stress hormones, which are very destructive for our system. So for those who are starting out or those who really want to build an endurance capacity, there's actually a sweet spot that occurs somewhere in this area here where the body's still really having to burn fat for its major source of energy, but is doing it quite inefficiently. And when that happens, the system looks for better, more in tune ways to do it. And one of the key things that happens with that is we start getting enzyme production, we start getting changes in specific muscle types as well, in order to try and increase fat utilization. And there's a couple of really key things that happen to the human brain with this as well, with elevation of hormones such as brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulate memory production, help prepare our brain from stress, and a whole lot of other things. So when we're starting out, we can actually get a fair bit of improvement and a fair bit of benefit and encouragement and development in this area without actually producing stress, meaning that you can more recurrently exercise without any issues. Okay, so we don't want the long recovery time. So there's a whole lot of different ways you can do this. The easiest way to do it though, and the most accurate way to do it, is to get yourself a heart rate monitor. So a heart rate monitor, basically, there's a whole lot of different ways to do it. Still the most accurate ones that we have available though, have a chest strap, a strap that goes around your chest, that then sends a signal to a wristwatch, which you can then just read the information off. Or you can even program a set of values into it, and it will just tell you when you're going above or below those levels. So there's a really complicated method of assessing this, which requires you assessing gas production and how much you breathe in and how much you breathe out. But a really cool formula was developed by a guy by the name of Phil Maffetone, a good friend of mine in the US, going back about almost 40 years ago now, based upon hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tests that he did, where he basically tried to figure out a bit of a mathematical formula which could actually try and work out this area here. And from years of doing different testing, like, it's relatively accurate. I won't say it's 100% accurate. It won't be anywhere near as accurate as doing very specific testing on the individual basis, but if you're starting out now, it'll give you a really good ballpark to make sure that you're not overtraining. There's a lot more to it, but I'm going to keep it really simple for those who are starting out. If we take 180 and minus your age, so if you're 40 years of age, you take 180 minus your age, which takes you to 140. Now, if you've been training in this type of mode in an aerobic pattern ongoing for about 12 months without any major issues, no injuries in any way, shape or form, keep that value. If you haven't been doing any of that stuff, or you've been injured in the last 12 months, then what we're going to do is add 5 to that value. So if you're 40 years of age, 180 minus a 40 is now 140 plus 5. You're now at that's plus 5 to your age. You're now down to 135. If you're on any kind of chronic medication in any way, shape or form, or have any major illness, then we want to add 10 to our age. So now we're going to go 180. If you're 40, 180. 40 plus the 10, so 180 now minus 50, that would now take us to 130. So this becomes our maximum heart rate in which you're going to train at. And for the average person, that's actually quite low. Like, you'll find for the average person who doesn't have done really a lot of training, this is probably going to not really get you out of a walk too significantly. As your fitness gets better though, you'll find you'll start jogging, you'll start running, and then if you can actually run at that heart rate, you'll find that running is actually really easy and you'll very, very quickly fall in love with it. So how do we monitor this? Okay, so what we basically do, if we understand this is our value, and let's give us a heart rate. Let's say our heart rate was, let's make it up. Let's say our maximum was 145. Sorry, my writing's going a bit funny there. That's 145 as our maximum heart rate. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep our heart rate between about 135 to 145. What we're going to do is just slowly bring it up over about a 10 to 15 minute period, which is kind of like our warm up. Hold it there for a short period of time and then slowly bring it back down. If you're really fit, you could probably do 30 minutes in that zone. If you're just starting out, 10 minutes is probably enough. If we're going 10, 10 and 10, that's probably enough to get you started with. So if you work out a distance, so let's say it's 4 kilometers to begin with, then what we basically do is we travel 4 kilometers in this heart rate, and what you want to do is just time how long it takes you to get through that. So let's say it was 28 minutes, okay, and we just plot it. So 28 minutes might be just there. So now what ends up happening is every 3 weeks, just repeat that same test. Do that 4 same kilometers on that same course at that same heart rate. And what you should find is if your heart rate, if your aerobic capacity, your fitness, your fat metabolism is improving, then what we should find, and you're not stressed and pushing yourself too hard, what we should find is that that same distance actually takes you quicker and quicker and quicker. So today it might be at 28 minutes. In 3 weeks time we might find it's 25 minutes. In 3 weeks after that we now find it's 24 minutes, etc., etc. So what we'll find is that we have this kind of gradual improvement over time. And this is really an indication that things are going on the right track. Your aerobic capacity is getting better, your fat metabolism is improving as well. Eventually what will happen is this will start to plateau and it may even start turning backwards. If it plateaus or it starts turning backwards, this can be a sign of one or two things. Either one, your system is getting stressed, you're pushing too hard, you're overworking yourself, so therefore your aerobic capacity is dropping. In other words, this graph here is changing negatively, which means you need to back off. Or otherwise, it may actually be that your aerobic system, your fat metabolism, has reached its capacity for now, and now it's time to actually start pushing yourself harder to try and get through things and pick that back up. You can tell very, very easily, because if you back off your training a little bit and this keeps going back down, you know you're on the right track. If you push the intensity higher, and this slows down even further, well then you know this is more likely to be a stress-orientated situation. So there's plenty of different ways you can do it, but this is a very, very simple, easy introduction into how you can start incorporating exercise in a safe way, especially if you want to start doing anything significant from a cardiovascular fitness perspective, endurance-wise especially, heading forward. It's a great way to lose weight as well, where you're not actually going to risk pushing yourself too hard and getting injured. Anyway guys, that's a quick introduction into aerobic training and building an aerobic base, improving your fat metabolism. As I said, there's plenty of different ways to do it. I've crazy simplified down some really heavy science down here for you. So if you have any questions or you want to know more about anything to do with this stuff, just send me a message or post it up, and I'll get you the information that you need. So remember guys, it's all about adding a life to your years. We'll catch you in the next vid. See you guys.